Good morning, everyone. It is 11 o'clock on the dot, and we are going to get started with our program this morning. My name is Veronica Birch Flores, and I have the honor and privilege to serve as the Chief Operating Officer at First National Bank of South Miami. I'll be hosting you today through this informational and wonderful program, which my friend Angel Medina will be providing. At First National Bank of South Miami, we take great pride since 1952 in providing important and critical community services in this unprecedented time that has been going on for nearly 6 months. 2020 is a blur. We started this in mid-March, this pandemic, this COVID virus, and it's just turned our world literally upside down. It's turned our personal lives upside down, and certainly the devastating impact on our businesses. We have tried to be here with you every step of the way, providing information and guidance and financing as we can. And we appreciate your business and your loyalty to the bank. Today is our next program on forgiveness, when to apply for this PPP forgiveness. And I think you're going to find by the end of the program, you probably don't want to apply just yet. And Angel will get into more details. As all of us have been reading, in Washington, they're looking at forgiving up to $150,000. That would certainly alleviate a lot of work from our smaller businesses and no doubt from the banks as well. It would alleviate about 82% of our loans, which are under that $150,000 threshold. So that would be a primary reason. If your loan is a smaller amount, you may not have to go through all of the headaches of applying. But Angel will get into more details while we wait for Washington to try and figure out what they're doing. But that's a whole nother story. We've got enough problems dealing with our community and with our businesses to try and figure out what's happening in DC. So I appreciate your being here. There is a Q&A section throughout today's session. Anytime you have a question, just post it there, and at the end of our webinar presentation, I will be posing those questions to Angel, and we will likely get to all of them. So without further ado, I present to you my pal, the Executive Vice President and Director of Client Services. He is our resident guru on all things PPP and forgiveness. My good friend and amazing banker, Mr. Angel Medina. Good morning, Angel. You're muted. Angel, you're muted.
Yeah. Let's start with unmuting. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. As Veronica said, we've been staying on top of the Paycheck Protection Program for many months now, and this will be our third on the forgiveness piece alone. This, as you all know, has been an ever-evolving, ever-changing situation, but we have stayed on top of, in front of, and hope that that you appreciate all the information we've been trying to provide you with. Our ultimate goal is to have you achieve 100% forgiveness on your PPP loan. So the question is, forgiveness now or later? And in today's session, we're going to be talking about the things that have happened since you received your PPP loan and whether or not you believe you're ready to apply for forgiveness. So let's begin with what's happening at the SBA. Well, since August 10th, the SBA has been ready to begin accepting forgiveness applications. They are no longer accepting new PPP applications. That ended on August 8th. As of July 31st, the SBA, through financial institutions, has approved over $520 billion in PPP loans, and over $32 billion of it have been in Florida. So your Florida banks have been working very hard to make sure that the money goes to those businesses that truly needed this assistance and their employees. So what's happening in Congress? Yeah, no, I'm not on mute. Not much. A lot of discussion, a lot of conventions, but not a whole lot of progress on the PPP front. But what are they considering? Well, for one thing, they're considering blanket forgiveness at a threshold of about $150,000. What does that mean? That means that if your loan is at $150,000 or less, you may be able to get away simply with an affirmation or some sort of certification that you use the monies properly and that you use them within the rules of the PPP loan program. And that would mean that you wouldn't have to present an application, just the certification, and you wouldn't have to present all the documentation. As best we know, it would mean, though, that you must retain all that documentation in the event that you would ever get audited. They're also considering expanding non-payroll expenses. From my perspective, I think this is a bit much because, quite frankly, when they moved the PPP dollars, the time you can spend them from 8 weeks and allowed you to choose 24 weeks if you applied for PPP before and received it before June 5th, I think that really gave people plenty of time to be able to spend the PPP dollars. But notwithstanding, there is some discussion that there are other non-payroll expenses that would be allowed under the things that Congress is considering. Finally, they are considering a PPP2 with the funds remaining from the original allocation of PPP1, and that's over $100 billion that would be available. The requirements appear to be that a business must have suffered a loss in revenue of at least 35% based on the same period the prior year in order to qualify for that. What's happened since we last spoke? Well, the form 3508EZ was created, and that was is a form that has abbreviated the forgiveness application. I'll talk about that in a minute. But essentially what that does is it says if you have not reduced your payroll, if you've not reduced anyone's salary wages by more than 25% during the covered period, then you can apply for an abbreviated forgiveness application, which is a little bit easier than the full application, but not quite as easy as simply a certification form. They've provided clarity on owner-employee forgiveness for payroll costs. Now, this is really the first time that they've provided this level of clarity on it, and it could impact your computations on payroll forgiveness. So when I start discussing that, pay close attention if you're an owner-employee. By the way, I forewarn you, if you are an owner-employee, you may not like what I have to say, but please don't shoot the messenger. We're only telling you what the guidelines that the SBA has established based on their perception of what Congress intended to be. Third, they've provided clarity on who and when you can use an alternative covered period. And you'll recall that we spoke about alternative covered period in webinars prior, and that really is to allow the business owner not to have to do a lot of reprogram of their payroll cycles in order to be able to incorporate all of their expenses for payroll, and gave people the option to use an alternative period, but that's being limited to those companies that either pay weekly or bi-weekly only. Fourth, they've provided guidance to government contractors, and let me comment on this because this is the only time I really talk about it. If you're a government contractor and the methodology of your payment is based on invoicing your payroll costs, so this happens sometimes in engineering firms, design build firms, those type of things, where they receive reimbursement for the professional services that they provide. You cannot get paid under that government contract and get apply for forgiveness under PPP. That would be considered double dipping, and that is not allowed. And then finally, this one we have talked about in the past, but I do want to remind you that Safe Harbor and the very last day to spend all your PPP dollars was moved to December 31st, 2020. So my first question to you is, are you comfortable that you will be fully forgiven? You have plenty of time. So be sure that you're going to be able to receive 100% forgiveness. You know, a lot of people have said, well, I got $100,000. I've now spent $100,000 in payroll. I'm ready to apply. And I tell those clients, slow down, slow down. You're better off if you apply for forgiveness and you have $200,000 worth of expenses. It's not that the SBA is going to fund you the other $100,000. It's that if you made any mistake, you made any interpretation, you didn't have a proper documentation, and one of your or one or several of your costs are disallowed, you still have plenty of room to achieve 100% forgiveness. And that's why, and Veronica said it early on, we're advising our clients, even those that spent it all within the 8-week period, to consider taking advantage of the full 24-week period for your covered period. The other question is, are you using the covered period or the alternative covered period? These are questions you have to be ready for when you go to apply. And remember again, the alternative covered period is simply the payroll cycle, whether weekly or bi-weekly, that is the next logical. And I'll go through an example of that in one moment. You're going to ask yourselves the question, am I eligible for the abbreviated 3508EZ? And do you have all your backup information ready and organized? Finally, do you have your SBA and the bank loan number? Both of these are very important. I will tell you that when you apply for forgiveness through our web portal, which is located on our web page through the PPP landing page, it says apply here or apply now, I think it says, it will auto-populate your SBA and your bank loan number as part of our online solution. So as I said, take your time. You know, it's better that you make sure that you get 100% forgiveness than you fall short. And why do I say that is because they really have not given us any guidance on, well, what happens if I apply, I made a mistake, and now I want to retract and reapply. There's no provision right now for it. And so taking a conservative approach, you have to assume once you apply, you're done. And the decisions are black and white. You're either going to get forgiveness, partial forgiveness, or no forgiveness. It's going to be that cut and dry. There may be options, but at this time, they're not available. Establish a drop dead date of when you must have everything submitted. What do I mean by that? Well, some of us are procrastinators, right? And some of us want to jump ahead and get it done as quickly as possible. So for the procrastinators, I say, look, take a look at when is the last day that you can apply for forgiveness, and make sure that 30 days or so before that, you absolutely have submitted your application. And let me say, you must submit your application within 10 months of the end of your covered period. Covered period, I'll remind you, begins on the first day that you were funded. And if you had more than one funding on your PPP loan, it's still the first day of the first funding. Let me show you what that means in a calendar format. So this client, ABC Company, received the PPP loan, which means that that loan was funded on that day, on April 20th of this year. If they chose the 8-week covered period, the end of the covered period would be June 14th. If that business paid on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and in this case, we're going to assume that ABC Company made payroll on a weekly basis, and that their payroll cycles begins on a Sunday and ends on a Saturday. So their covered period begins April 20th, but they chose to begin the alternative covered period on April 26th. I hope you see that in the top right-hand corner of your screen. So the last day of the alternative covered period for ABC Company would be June 20th. And if, on the other hand, the company chose a 24-week period, and by the way, if you applied before and received your loan before June 5th, then you have the option. You can choose 8-week or 24-week. If your loan was after June 5th, then it's the 24-week covered period or the 24-week alternative covered period. So back to ABC Company. Now they're looking at the 24-week covered period, and the end of that is not until October 4th. So let me go back to my comment I said a minute ago. 10 months plus the end of the covered period. So that would mean that this procrastinator would not have to apply until 10 months after October 4th. And it's the end of the covered period, 10 months after the end of the covered period, not the alternative covered period. Now, I'm telling you, wait. I'm not telling you, wait the full 10 months before you apply. I'd like to see you start applying after your 24-week covered period. That way you can make sure that all the expenses and payroll that can be requested forgiveness is part of your forgiveness application. Finally, I will comment that a borrower is not required to make any payments until the forgiveness amount has been remitted to the lender by the SBA. And what's that process? Well, the process is you're going to apply. The bank is going to have 60 days to review and has 3 decisions. That's all it can make. Approve full forgiveness, approve partial forgiveness, or reject or deny forgiveness. And so you, as a borrower, would not be required to make any payments until after the SBA has submitted the forgiveness amount to the bank, or the bank has determined that you are ineligible for forgiveness. So some of the things to think about and to understand is, did you make any reductions to your full-time equivalents that you have not rehired? Did you adjust anyone's salary by more than 25% that you have not reinstated within the safe harbor timeframe? And of course, have you captured all the forgivable expenses, again, notwithstanding that they might exceed the PPP loan amount? What's the safe harbor? The safe harbor is December 31st of this year. And what you're saying is, anytime before you apply for forgiveness, as long as you've reinstated your FTEs or reinstated their salaries, you now have safe harbor, and those reductions would not be considered against your forgiveness application. Briefly, payroll cost for non-owner employees is gross payroll, vacation, sick leave, medical leave, group health benefits, any applicable bonuses. Now, on an individual employee basis, there is a maximum forgivable compensation for any non-owner employee. And if you choose the 8-week covered or alternative covered period, that maximum is going to be $15,385. If you choose the 24-week period, it's $46,153. Now, the SBA provided a little bit more flexibility on payroll costs. For example, they said that any payroll costs paid during the covered period are eligible for forgiveness. So essentially, they flanked at the front and the back to give you a little bit more time. So if you paid on April 27th for the week of April 20th, even though you chose the alternative covered period, which otherwise would not have included that prior week would be part of your eligible forgivable payroll costs. Also, payroll costs that were incurred during the covered period, even if they were paid after the covered period, are also eligible for forgiveness. So you see what I mean by having those payroll cycles flanked on both sides of the covered or the alternative covered period. And again, I want to clarify, the alternative covered period can only be used by those businesses that had weekly or biweekly payrolls. Any other payrolls, you have to use the covered period, which means really that you're going to have to make some adjustments and within the payrolls to ensure that you're only including those costs that are eligible. So that's going to be a bit of a manual calculation for you. Now, if you have a third-party payroll service provider, they're well aware of these, and they're going to be able to provide you with the kind of reports that you're going to need in order to make your life easier. Now, here's the payroll cost for owner employees, and frankly, this one's a bit more complicated. First, they've capped the compensation of owner employees by aggregating throughout all companies that received PPP. So early on, and this may or may not apply to you, but there are clients that had multiple companies and were being paid through multiple companies. And it was not until this most recent interpretation that the SBA said that a owner employee can only receive the one-time maximum compensation across all of their companies. So this is a big change from the last time. Also, when you look at compensation caps, you're looking at 2.5 times the average monthly 2019 earnings. So let me take an example. Let's say you're an owner of a company that in 2019 you only paid yourself $50,000, but in 2020 you increased your salary. Even if you increased it on January 1st of 2020, you increased your salary to $100,000. You're only going to be able to apply for forgiveness based on the $50,000 annualized compensation. So this was yet another change for owner employees. Then if you're an S Corp, they said healthcare benefits are ineligible for forgiveness if you're a 2% or more owner employee. But then they also said that any family member that works for that company where the owner employee has 2% or more interest in that company, their health benefits also are ineligible for forgiveness. So I told you at the beginning that if you're an owner employee, you might not like what I have to say in this slide. And then finally, general partners compensation must be paid during the covered period. As a general partner, oftentimes these partnerships pay quarterly or annually. And what they're saying here is that unless it's paid during your compensation as a general partner is actually paid, not just incurred, but paid during this covered period, it's you're not going to be eligible for forgiveness. So this table here is meant to help you visualize a little bit. As you can see, owner's compensation for the 24-week period was capped at $20,833, for the 8-week at $15,385, but notwithstanding, there is that additional cap of not more than 2.5 times 2019. And again, it's across all the companies. So if you have more than one company and you're getting payroll by more than one company, you're still going to be limited by those amounts shown. Non-payroll costs, also a little bit more flexibility, mostly flanking the covered period again. Eligible costs incurred prior to the covered period but paid during the covered period are going to be eligible for forgiveness, and eligible costs incurred during the covered period but paid after, as long as it was paid before the next billing cycle, are also eligible for forgiveness. Finally, clarification that the alternative covered period applies only to payroll costs and not to non-payroll costs. So when you're looking at non-payroll costs, you must look only at the covered period. And then finally, there was clarity on what a transportation utility expense was. And we had all kinds of thoughts and interpretations, but if you remember, we always said, don't count on it. And we were right to do so because, quite frankly, it refers to transportation utility fees that are assessed at state and local governments, where Florida, we don't have it, so it really doesn't apply to our Florida clients. So now that you're clear on what can be included, let's briefly talk about the abbreviated Form 3508EZ or the full form. And it's You have to answer one of these three questions positively. The first one is if you're self-employed, an independent contractor, or a sole proprietor, and you had no employees at the time that you submitted your PPP loan application and you didn't include their salary in the computation of the average monthly payroll, you're eligible to utilize the 3508EZ. If you didn't reduce wages by more than 25% to any employee during either the covered or the alternative covered period, when you compare those employees to the employees that you had January 1st through March 31st, and you didn't reduce the number of employees or full-time equivalents, nor the average hours worked between January 1st and the end of the covered period, then you can use the easy form. Now, in this case, they're also giving you that safe harbor, which means, hey, I reduced the number of employees, but by the time I applied for forgiveness or before December 31st, 2020, I reinstated those employees. So there's some flexibility as far as that goes. Finally, the third and last question has to do with the same essentially as question number 2 in terms of the reducing wages by more than 25%, but it also says that if your business could not operate at the same level of business as directed by the Secretary of Health and Human Services or the Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or OSHA, then you can use the easy form as long as you demonstrate the supporting documentation. And here, I need you to remember that when they refer to employees, they're not talking about, let's call it for lack of a better word, highly compensated employees. They're not talking about employees that earned in excess of $100,000. They're talking about employees that earned $100,000 or less during 2019 on an annualized basis. So any payroll period during 2019, when you annualize it, it must show that the individual earned $100,000 or less. And finally, if you did answer positively, not to all three questions, but to any of those three questions, then you can use the abbreviated 3508EZ. And so what can you expect? Well, once you're ready, you go to our website, log on to the PPP page, and at the bottom of the page, there's a hyperlink to connect you with our secure online portal. You'll complete either Form 3508 or Form 3508EZ and upload all of the documentation that's required. It's a lot of documentation, I know, but hopefully you've been listening to us since the first webinar, and we've said keep that documentation, keep it handy, keep it available. There are also links on our website to the actual Form 3508 and the 3508EZ. So if you want to download them and print it out and complete it by hand, and then go on to the portal and complete it online, that would be a good best practice. That way you're assured that you have everything you need and your application process doesn't get interrupted, and then it should take you 10 or 15 minutes to do it. Once you've submitted, we will acknowledge receipt, and we will have 60 days to process forgiveness. Don't expect to take 60 days at all. We expect that this will be a nice, smooth process as long as you've provided all of your documentation. And once we've made a determination in whole or part for forgiveness, we'll submit it to the SBA, and then the SBA has 90 days to confirm forgiveness, submit payment of principal and interest to the bank, and If it was a partial forgiveness, at that point, the bank will notify you and you'll start making payments on whatever balance remains. And that's it. We really hope that that you found today's webinar useful. As we've always said, our job has been to stay abreast of this, try to be as informed as possible, bring you that information, but we always very strongly recommend, especially when it comes to tax questions, that you seek expert opinions from your accountant or your attorney. On that note, I turn it back over to Veronica. Thank you all.
Thank you, Angel. I hear the roaring applause for you once again. Well done, sir. Yes, it is an important reminder that we are not tax attorneys. We are not accountants. We're just doing our best to bring you the information as we interpret it and understand it to be. So, Angel, we do have several questions that I'm going to pose to you from our participants on today's webinar. So the first one is, how is payroll reduction considered when, number one, no change in number of employees, and number two, salaries reduced from $200,000 a year to $100,000 a year?
Not, it's irrelevant. Though you can ignore those reductions. They're concerned with individuals 100,000 and below.
Okay. So if I use my PPP funds in the 8-week period, when should I apply for forgiveness? I used 100% for payroll. Way to go, Gabriel. Thank you.
Listen, as soon as you're ready, right? But what we're saying is, if you can submit a forgiveness application for 150,000, I'd submit it for 150,000. We don't know what to expect. We don't know when we review that, if there is some documentation that maybe doesn't tie perfectly, and either the bank or the SBA says, no, we have to disallow it. We have not seen a process where we can go back to you and say, here, fix this, and we'll resubmit it. That process may exist, but it doesn't exist right now. So our recommendation is, what's your hurry? Take your time. You got 150, you got 200,000. God bless you. Put it in. You'll be almost 100% assured that you'll get 100% forgiveness.
Thank you. Can you have 10 weeks to complete your loan amount forgiveness?
Yeah, whatever time it takes you.
Okay. What is the owner?
You can have 10 weeks, but you can't then choose the 8-week period. So 10 weeks, but you choose the 24-week period.
Okay. What is the owner/employee restriction, if any?
Oh, there's a whole, I had a whole slide on that, right? And this slide will be available on our website. You really need to take a hard look at that, because there's several. The one big one is that an owner employee that applied for multiple PPP loans for 3 or 4 companies is only going to be entitled to one forgiveness, not for payroll throughout all 3 or 4 of those companies.
And Carlos may have written this prior to your slide. So Carlos, presuming you do, the slides will be on our PPP Resource Center on our website. And of course, so will this recording. A few of you have asked about the recording. A few of you have also asked about the slides. Both of them are available on our PPP Resource Center on our website. So pretty easy to find us on fnbsm.com. I am self-employed and received my loan before the SBA announced the cap on self-employed compensation. Based on the loan amount to spread out the loan, it would be better for me to use the 24-week rather than the 8-week period. But I only need a couple of extra weeks to be within the cap, not the entire 24 weeks.
That's fine. Also remember that payroll costs have to be at least 60% of the total forgiveness. So if you use the 24-week period, I think the number was 20,000 or 20,833. So you're limited in the amount of non-payroll costs that you can put through. You may or may not owe some money back. I don't know. You got to do the math.
All right. What does salary reduction reinstatement mean? Does it mean you start paying them their original salary, or does it also mean you have to pay them the back pay that was reduced?
No, you don't have to go back. You just start them fresh, right? So let me make an example that's easy for me. I was paying somebody $10 an hour, and because of COVID, I reduced them to $5 an hour. I know that these are illegal numbers, but I'm just trying to make it easy for me. You reduce them to $5 an hour. Now, as long as you can bring them back to $7.50 an hour, you're okay. But it doesn't mean that you have to do that for the 8 or the 10 or the 24 weeks. I just have to show that now, before the December 31, 2020, and before I apply for forgiveness, I've reinstated them back to within a 25% reduction. You don't even have to go back to the $10.
Okay. So the 1122 message said I only need a couple of extra weeks, not the full 24. So you've addressed that. Can you go ahead and submit once the number of weeks I need to be within the cap? Yes, you can. You don't have to wait for the 24 weeks. You can apply at 12 weeks if you used it all in 10 weeks, not a problem. But you would be applying, as Angel clarified, for the 24 week, not the 8 week. Are rent and utilities okay?
Yeah, that's part of your non-payroll costs. Absolutely. It's mortgage interest, it's rent and utilities.
And also, because we've had the question previously, it would even be a lease on a car that's used for company, for business purposes. It could be a lease on your building or a lease on your company car, correct, Angel?
Yes.
Okay. I used all the PPP 100% for payroll in a 10-week period. So does that mean I need to choose the alternative covered period?
The alternative covered period is only to make it easier for you to align with your payroll cycles. That's all it is. It's just a convenience so that you can more readily and easily say, here's my payroll report for this cycle, without having to say, well, in this cycle, we had 2 days within the covered period, and in the following one, we had 5, without having to go through all those gyrations.
Okay. And Nellie asked, can we share the slides? Yes, Nellie, we love to share. You're going to be able to get those slides on our website. For S corporation owners, more than 2%, who did receive PPP loan funds, which included health benefits, what happens to that amount? Is it reported separately? The bank approved the PPP loan, which included health insurance benefits for the owners and their family members.
Yep, I know. No, but it's not all bad news, right? Because there's a lot of other, either because of the expanded period of time or because of the expanded time frame for non-payroll costs, there's other costs that you're going to now be able to put in. It's just not going to be related to that one. You're going to be capped in an S corp based on the caps on the owner employees.
Yeah, so but as you say, Angel, it's not all bad, because now with the expanded time period, you're likely going to be able to capture those funds anyway, because you have a much longer period, and the amount that had to be on payroll is also reduced. But if you now can use it up to 24 weeks instead of 8 weeks, you should be okay, Robin. Can you remind us of the list of documents we need to upload so we have all of them ready? Perhaps you have it on an earlier slide.
So I can give you three places to go. One, a prior on our website, a prior PPP forgiveness webinar. On our website, the 3508 and the 3508EZ instructions detail exactly what documentation, and it gives you some options. If you don't have A, you can use B, that type of thing. But it's very clear. It won't be hard.
Okay. I heard the EIDL advance is deducted from the PPP loan forgiveness. Is that so?
Yes. Yes, except the part that's the grant. Now, the conflict with the grant on the EIDL is the economic injury disaster loan that the SBA put out even before PPP. And there's a $10,000 grant there. As long as you didn't use that grant for PPP expenses, that's still going to be forgiven. If you represent that you use that for payrolls, and there's no double dipping, in other words. So caution that you don't represent that you use the same monies to cover the same expenses.
Okay. Kathleen McGovern says this was very useful. Thank you, Angel, another fan. And still able to include mortgage, rent, payments, utilities, landscaping, cleaning expenses, all of these as non-payroll expenses?
Okay, so you threw a lot of stuff there, right? Because cleaning and other expenses were never part of the eligible expenses. I encourage you to either review the webinar, review the slide presentations that we've done on prior ones, because the only non-payroll costs have to do with mortgage, interest, not principal, mortgage interest, lease payment, and utility. That's all.
So not cleaning and landscaping.
Right.
Okay. I understood early on that rent was eligible as a non-payroll. Is this still true? Yes, Ori,
Yeah.
still true.
Yeah.
If my PPP loan was for $200,000 and change, do I have the option to apply for forgiveness for the $150,000 blanket forgiveness, or
No.
do I have to apply for the full amount?
No, unfortunately not.
I think so.
You have to apply for the full amount.
All right. If you receive $2,800 and it's used for payroll, do you think it will be forgiven?
Yeah.
Sure. And if you mean the blanket forgiveness, then that would be awesome, because who knows what that will look like, but certainly be a lot easier. That is one of the driving reasons that Angel conveyed. You'd want to wait. Let's wait and see. It's not costing you anything. The loan is accruing a 1% interest, but that interest, if your loan is forgiven, is being paid by the SBA, not the borrower. The only time the borrower would be paying or that 1% is if you aren't forgiven on your loan, or a portion of your loan isn't forgiven. So really, Elizabeth, you got nothing to lose by waiting and seeing. With the changes on the eligible expenses, does it make sense to just choose the 24-week period and more than cover the amount of the loan, getting full forgiveness with just payroll?
Yes. But again, why limit yourself? I mean, to add those other costs is just copying a few more pieces of paper and saying, forgive me for $200,000 when I only have a $100,000 loan. Great.
Right. So certainly going from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, you would likely have more than enough for your payroll, because you have 3 times the amount of payroll periods to get through. The maximum forgiveness then is $150,000. No, Carlos, sorry, we're confusing it. What is on the line in Washington is the lawmakers are trying to make it a blanket forgiveness, which means you would not have to submit any of this documentation for any loan up to $150,000. And I will tell you, our trade group, the the bankers, American bankers, Florida bankers, our different industry is behind this too and very supportive of it, because we know it's going to make it much easier for our consumers, because our business owners, because in our particular bank, it's about 80% of the loans, as I stated earlier, but industry-wide, it's about 83% of the loans that were given are under that $150,000 threshold. So the bankers and many lawmakers are saying, look, why are we going to put these small business owners through this brain damage? And by the way, who's going to be processing all of this and checking all of the documentation? So that's why there is a movement to have a blanket forgiveness of up to 150,000. Some have suggested 200,000, some have suggested 250,000, but that's why that's out there. Now, that is different from applying for forgiveness, because if this blanket forgiveness happens, again, we won't know what that looks like. And we heard 5 weeks ago it was going to be in the next week or two. It still hasn't happened. So we are hopeful that it will still happen when they can vote on this. But let's say it does happen. That means that up to 150,000, there'll be some simpler way for you to get forgiveness, and we don't know what that will look like, that you don't have to go through all of the rigmarole. Now, let's say it doesn't happen, or it does happen. If you have under that, that's why, again, there's no hurry to apply for forgiveness right now, because especially if you're under that 150, then it very well may be a much simpler way for you to know that your loan has been forgiven. Please provide a link to the PPP section of your website. I don't have the link exactly handy at this moment, but it's pretty easy to find. If you go to fnbsm.com, you're going to be able to see a little call out box for a PPP resource center. And there you're going to find previously recorded webinars. You're going to find slides. You're going to find the applications, and you're going to find instructions. So you will find all of that on there. So Robin, if you have some difficulty looking for it, still can't find it, send us an email and we'll be happy to send you the link directly back. How do you select the 24-week period? That's on the application itself. Thank you, Angel. This is very helpful, Mr. Conroy says. And any guesses about the 150,000? Gosh, Al, I don't know. Let's say write your congressman and tell them to get their act together, because we would all like to see that happen. I mean, the small business owners have been through enough turmoil. At least give them a break on this. And you know, part of us, right, are saying, gosh, but you know, we already know there's been a lot of fraud on this. So you're just giving an easy pass to the people who lied, cheated, and stole. But really the fraud that we've been reading about, because there has been a lot of fraud, but it's been the bigger amounts, 800,000, million, 2 million, 3 million. So I'm not saying there was no fraud on the smaller ones, but the fraudulent cases we've been reading about it. But of course, those are the ones who are going to make the headlines. But I think that some of the trepidation was that if there was fraud involved. So I think that's one of the holdups. And it's also something else for Democrats and Republicans to fight about. So there you go. And we received PPP loan and now have been approved for 150,000 EIDL. Does one impact the other?
Yes, yes, they do. You can't, the concept of double dipping applies. So you have to be careful what you use one for and the other for. If you use them both for the same purpose, you're only going to be forgiven for one thing.
Okay. Is the suggestion to wait until October to begin applying for forgiveness?
Why not? What can it hurt?
Right. Okay, can we make an appointment to meet with a rep? Yes, drop us an email and we can Zoom with you or do a phone call or exchange information by email, anonymous. And how do we select the 8 or the 24 week? That's once you go through the application, you're going to see that there. And Ms. Mulholland, I just want to the website, please confirm the presentation slides are not there yet, correct? I don't think they've made it there yet, right, Angel? The slides
Not
from this
not for today. I think that they'll be there after this after this presentation. We're recording this one. I think it'll be there after this one.
Yeah, and so you'll work with Gabriel in making sure where on that PPP Resource Center, the slides themselves, which people are so interested in because a lot of them are very information packed. So yes, you're right, Ms. Mulholland, they aren't there yet, but we will be sure to get them there. If you wait to apply and end up owing money, you will have to pay more interest if you would have otherwise paid it off.
Okay, so here's how that's going to work. The answer is yes, right? Yes, it's 1% interest. Okay, from the day that you receive the money. So if you had a $50,000 loan and the approval was for 25,000, yes, you would be responsible for the 25,000 interest from day one. So yes.
Okay, our last question. My good friend, all the way from Chicagoland, Aaron Houlihan, nice to hear from you. Are business insurance premiums eligible as an allowable expense?
No. I was trying to remember all the allowable expenses. No, they're not.
Yeah. Angel, you have amazed again. So it is 11:57. We are always respectful of our clients' time, and we know as business owners, you've got a lot going on. We thank you for attending. We'll make sure to get the slides up on the website and as soon as we can. And today's webinar will be posted there tomorrow. So we will get this from Zoom, we'll download it and we'll get it out there. We also have a YouTube channel that all of our videos are available on. So Angel, I thank you so much. Your accolades are coming in on the comments and in the chat. So thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.